business is the invocation. Mr. Lumpkins?
Mr. Spoonhour's got it.
Mr. Spoonhour, okay. If you would, please lead us in.
Please stand if you can. Dear Lord, we just thank you for the freedom to come together and assemble like this, God, and to help to make our land better. We thank you that we are talking about things that you've given us, God. Help us to be good stewards with what you've given us and to represent all peoples involved. We pray these things in your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Spoonhour. Next item on the agenda is the chair's comments. I'd like to remind everyone of our joint town hall meetings. They're scheduled as follows. District 1 on Wednesday, March the 11th. Districts 2 and 3, Monday, March 16th. And Districts 4 and 5 on Thursday, March 26th. So those 4 are coming up, and traditionally we will be going over the budget during those town halls. Secondly, I would like to thank everyone who participated in the county trash cleanup day last Saturday. It was kind of short notice, put it together in a couple of weeks, but we had 54 volunteers. We picked up 120 bags of trash, 47 tires, 1 mop, 1 fence post, 1 box fan, a box of flooring, and a desk. So thanks everyone for your help with that. All right, so now we begin the new business segment. First presentation would be the county budget, revenues, debt policies. I believe that Ms. Horlacher.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board. First presentation is going to be on the general fund revenue budget. Okay, the first slide I'm showing you is the total general fund revenue. And you can see from the pie chart that 71% of our general fund revenue comes from property taxes. And then after that, the pieces of the pie get much smaller with state and federal, other local money, and the fees, licenses, and other charges, which I'll go into in more detail in a second. So we're going to pop out each one of those pieces of pie, and the first one we're starting with is the property taxes. So this is property taxes on all, both real estate and personal property. And the different categories on this, of course, you can see the biggest is our real estate taxes. And then the smaller, the blue, is the personal property taxes, which we think of as our car tax. And that number also includes our business personal property. And the real property taxes, all other, that would be like things like all our delinquent taxes and our penalties and interest. And you can see there's a tiny piece of the pie, and that is that we, which we'll go into more in the TCSD presentation, but we transfer that 55% revenue sharing to the TCSD every year. So the way that's indicated is you have your whole real estate taxes, and then you subtract from that the amount that's transferred. The next piece of pie that's kind of bumped out is the proposed sales and other taxes. And you can see with that, the biggest part of that is our local sales tax that we get returned to us from the state every month. So the state collects and keeps some and gives the rest back to us. And then the rest of the pie is made up of some smaller pieces, including our business license tax, bank stock tax, and basically anything else that we call a tax. proposed state and federal, we get very little federal money, and that's the red piece of the pie. And then state is broken up into 3 different categories. The biggest being non-categorical state aid. And this is primarily 2.8 million of that is the PPTRA money, the money that's returned to us based on the Personal Property Tax Relief Act from years ago, and that's a flat amount of 2.8 million, and we always get that, and then we give some relief to our citizens for their property tax. State share of local offices, that would be our constitutional officers, and that's the money that we get from the state to support their offices. And then categorical state aid are things that are, that the aid is for a specific need. And you can see a little bit more of that on the next slide. So non-categorical state aid, like I said, is, and I need to explain the parentheses. The parens looks like a negative number. In the accounting world, that means a credit, and the revenue is a credit. So I apologize for that. In transferring to our new system, we haven't worked out everything yet. And so that is not a negative revenue, that is a revenue, indicates a revenue. So non-categorical, like I said, the biggest part of that is the 2.8 million that comes from the state. And then the categorical state aid, that's, like I said, things, specific programs, for instance, the victim witness program, or the DMV reimbursements that we get back from running a DMV office here. Other state and federal funds are the state share of local offices, and for the most part we think of that as comp board money, which it is for the most part. It also is a small amount of money we get back from the Department of Elections for the support of the Registrar's office. And then you can see the little bit of federal aid we get is victim witness. We also get back a portion from the federal government for supporting social services. So the government gives us funds for supporting that department. This is something new I wanted to show you, inspired by some questions. So these are our traditional comp board departments, Commissioner of Revenue, Treasurer, Clerk, Commonwealth Attorney. And then with the Sheriff, the comp board considers that it is supporting both the Sheriff's operations of public safety, but also the judicial administration of the courts. So you can see from what we get back from the comp board that it is a fraction of what it costs to operate those departments. But comp board, it's fairly steady. It usually goes up a small % each year. But as we know, the comp board is itself is underfunded, and in turn underfunds us in terms of our constitutional officers. And then the last bump out is the other local sources. We have things like fines, interest, and lease. Predominantly, that is the interest we earn on the funds that we have in an investment pool. Permits, fees, and licenses, the biggest thing there is building permits, which is about 1.1 million. Miscellaneous can be anything from insurance adjustments, miscellaneous. And charges for services, that is the biggest thing there is our EMS cost recovery. Also things like charging for the Parks and Rec classes. So just quickly, you've seen these already in Mary Ann's, last month in Mary Ann's, and these are total taxable assessed values, and you can see how the trend there. And she also showed us in her presentation new construction assessed values. And so that gets us to this chart that shows us, what I was trying to show here is not just budget to budget year, but like we see in FY19, our actuals came in slightly higher than what we had budgeted in FY20. Our forecast is coming in a little higher than that. And then our budget for FY21, it continues the trend. So the point being that we have conservative budgeting. And so, you know, sometimes from budget year to budget year, it seems kind of like a leap. On the other hand, if you look at where you're really going to come in, it's just keeping along with the trend for the most part. And the same thing with personal property tax. You see that we actually got more in 19 than we budgeted in 20. So and local sales tax revenue has been steadily growing as well. There doesn't seem to be any one particular item that's growing. We are getting more, you know, more places that remit the sales tax. Tractor Supply and like Drive Shack pays sales tax on their food sales. So things like that, and then just general economy growth are increasing our sales tax revenues. This is just a summary of some of the biggest revenues. We're seeing steady increases in the real estate tax. The amount we pass over to the TCSD continues to increase as well. So we expect that'll be about 1.8 million. Personal property taxes, delinquents, we try to keep that kind of steady because they do a really good job here of collecting our delinquent taxes, but obviously once all the taxes are collected, we don't expect that will go up too quickly. State revenue, as you can see, stays pretty flat. Sales tax is increasing, business licenses, slow increase there, and building permits have kind of stayed steady. That's one thing you can't always predict very well. You know, you could get some big permits come in one time. You don't know the timing of those, but last year we did decrease our fees a little, so we're expecting that will kind of hold steady. And I think I'm ready for questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hornacker. Any questions from the board at this point? Okay. All right, you're free to continue.
Okay. We will go on to our debt policies. So I always put this slide up here just as a reminder, the amount of our debt service. When we talk about our debt service, it's the amount of money required to make our payments on principal and interest throughout the year. And how you pay your debt service affects your credit rating, just like at home. Okay, so this is looking at the debt from the general fund side. These are our major and only components of our debt right now. So the VPSA series 1999 will be paid off this year, the current year we're in. That leaves a little bit on the VPSA 2014B, which will be paid off in 2027, and then the money we borrowed to build the Emergency Operations Center, there's money outstanding on that, and that will be paid off in 2031. And just to illustrate that is our existing debt service. So that is currently what we have. Payments are going down because we're paying off old debt. we are in this budget planning some future borrowings. We know that there is a new school facility budgeted for 2022. Project is about $35.2 million. We will have ended up putting in about $1.7 million in cash over this series of the last couple years. And then we're also contemplating building a circuit court building in 2024. And again, we've been putting some cash in, which of course is best practice to pay for part of an investment like that in cash and then borrow the rest. So when you start to look at, well, how will that change the debt service picture, you get into a lot of different colors. And so the gold illustrates our existing debt service, so that's going down, as you saw in some previous slides. And then the blue is the new debt service on top of that. And so you can see that that puts us at a point where we have a peak, and we have some numbers that are over 4 million at one point. Our plan currently, and that we're working on, is to build up that reserve, build up a debt. Whoops, what did I just do?
Oh, go back. Just
Did
hit the back arrow.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Is to build up a debt reserve, and we're currently doing that. We so every year we budget to the debt plus what we intend to put in the debt reserve. And what we're trying to do is build up to a point where we're at 3.9 million in debt service, and we can keep that steady for as many years as this graph shows you, and still have the money to maybe some years pay a little more in debt service. So where you see where it says build up reserve, we've got a couple years there where the debt, our own debt, will be going down, but we'll still budget and set aside the 3.8, soon to be 3.9 million. And then in the few years when we do have that debt service over 4 million, we'll already have that money set aside. And then we can keep, the plan being that the 3.9 million fits our current budget, it fits our current tax rate, and I'll show you later, it fits within our policies, and it's the number that we're comfortable would fit into the budget at the current tax rate. And then you see on top of it, the future debt service, that is for the, I'm sorry, you see on top of it the green line, which is the balance in the debt reserve. So that will allow us then to build it up and then slowly break it down. And then the debt will then be 3.9 itself, and we'll be budgeting for 3.9. And it's nice to keep that flattened out, that number that you're budgeting for, because then you know your budget can accommodate for it. And when you have growth in your revenues, you don't have to use it for debt service. So when we're planning all this and thinking about this, and best practice, of course, is to have some debt policies. And those are just different ratios that we measure how much debt we have and what our capacity is to have more debt. So the first one is the ratio of debt service expenditures to total expenditures should not exceed 12%. Now 12% is our policy, 10% is our target. And you know, just like in any other place, you don't want to be putting too much each year away for debt service. You want other things to be able to spend on for services. And then there's another policy, and this goes more towards our overall capacity as a county, net debt, and that includes all our debt, as a percentage of the market value of taxable property should not exceed 2.5%. So this is just illustration of where we think we'll end up at. We, of course, don't know for sure, but we think that as a percent of general fund expenditures, our debt service will be well below the policy. You know, with the peak maybe in 2023. And again, this is all based on estimates of how fast the budget grows. And so it's subject to variation, but it's our best planning tool. And then the same with the net debt as a percent of taxable assessed value. You can see that it doesn't even cross into the 2% mark. It stays below 2% for the entire peak of debt service. And are there questions on debt and debt service?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Horlacher. Any questions from the board?
Quickly on,
Mr. Lumpkins?
on slide 8, can you go back 2 slides? I think it's 2 slides. The net debt includes, utility revenue bonds?
Yes, it does.
So that includes Tuckahoe Creek?
Correct.
I'm just looking at our debt policy. It says projects such as the VRA obligation for the Tuckahoe Creek Service District, which is supported by a dedicated stream of revenue or other self-supporting obligations, will not be included in this calculation.
Oh, okay, so I misstated then. Self-supporting, meaning the TCSD is self-supporting by virtue of the ad valorem and the 55%. So it does not include that portion of it. There are some utility revenue bonds, some small outstanding debt for old projects, and it would include that.
Gotcha. Net debt shall be defined to include bond issuance directly supported by the general fund, right?
Right.
So things that are supported by the general fund.
Right,
Debt.
and the utility debt, those smaller pieces that are still out there, they are not supported by the general fund, but they're still included
But they're
in this
included.
calculation, but the TCSD is not.
Thank you.
Question. Any other questions? Ms. Horlacher, I do have one. Just remind us on, what was your slide 3, current general fund debt outstanding, the 2014B debt, what is that?
That was not borrowed in 2014B, it's just how we name it, because it was refinanced in 2014B when the VPSA offered us a lower interest rate. But it's an old, it's old school debt that was, you know, I honestly don't exactly know, except I think it probably had to do with some renovations or, you know, and that's something I can find out, but it's for the schools.
Okay, I just don't remember us borrowing the money in 2014, so it's like,
No, we didn't do anything in 2014. We
Okay.
didn't.
all right, thank you very much. All right, so no further questions. Ms. Horlacher, to continue, I guess, the general government administration.
Okay. So I'm going to briefly go through all the departments in general government, and there are 11 of them. Of course, then they, primary function is the administration functions of the county, legal, financial, administrative, electoral responsibilities, and also includes 2 of our constitutional officers. So the overall general government budget, this is all 11 of those departments, is increasing 5%. And the first budget is the Board of Supervisors budget. The Board of Supervisors budget is personnel costs are rising due to the salary increase on January 1st. So FY21 will be the first year of a full budget of that salary increase, and some benefit choices as well have caused those personnel increases to go up. The operating increases reflect dues. We it's in the budget of increased dues, about $5,000 to VACO, and some software license increases. And so before I go on, I'm going to now turn it over to Dean Lynch and let him discuss VACO with you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members, Mr. Badesky. Thank you for allowing me to be here and talk a little bit about VACO, Virginia Association of Counties. I would invite you to join other counties in participating in VACO. A great organization, been around since 1934. And a little bit about the governance of VACO. We have 34 board members on VACO that serves VACO, and we have an executive committee of 7 people that's made up of predominantly rural elected officials. We have one urban gentleman to be president-elect next year, but outside of that, it's really more of our rural localities that are governing VACO right now. We exist really to support you all in what you do. We support counties, and we support you all in you doing your job for your citizens. We have I guess I can say that our culture is a servant leadership culture that we have at VACO, and we know that it takes many counties to get legislative things done. It takes collaboration, and that's what we do at VACO. It's not just suburban, it's not just urban, it's not just rural. It takes all counties leveraging what they can put together, put on the table to get things done. I'm going to talk just a little bit quickly about the 4 planks of our platform, our platform that we have at VACO, our strategic plan, and that is, number 1 is advocacy, the 2nd is education, the 3rd is membership engagement, and the 4th is business services. Quickly, a little bit about advocacy. We're in the middle of General Assembly session. We had a big election this past year, and things are moving very quickly. I talked to Mr. Peterson earlier. Everything is very progressive this year. You'll see a lot of stuff in this dealing with collective bargaining, minimum wage, a whole host of issues that are out there that impact counties in some form or fashion. We've got over 3,700 bills that were put in, and we probably, as a local government county association, have probably touched about 90% of those bills in some form or fashion. Trying to protect local government from unfunded mandates, trying to protect local government from just plain old mandates of things that your county is going to have to do going forward. But we also have some very proactive things that we've put out there. I don't know if you've been following along, but we have always felt at our association that we should have the equal taxing authority as cities and towns. And we do have that bill in. We had it put in the House and Senate. We have bipartisan support for those bills. They're a little different coming out of each house. The House is a little different from the Senate bill, but both those bills are going to go to conference, and we hope that we're going to have a good, some type of authority coming out of the conference that will give you all the ability. It's not a mandate by any means, but at least give you the ability to raise revenue like cities and towns do going forward. And those include the excise taxes of a food and beverage tax. It also includes admissions tax, a TOT, transient occupancy tax, and a cigarette tax. So those are the options that you may have going forward. There will be some caps on it, and there will be some delayed implementation. But right now, we have felt that local county governments do not have that authority, and so we're seeking that this time. Other issues, collective bargaining. I don't know what to tell you about collective bargaining. There was a House bill in that made it mandatory that you participate in collective bargaining. There's a Senate bill that made it optional for the employer, which would be you all, to participate in collective bargaining. I've been told as of this morning that there may be another option out there once it comes out of conference that would give the employee the choice of whether to participate in collective bargaining. We don't know yet. But we have advocated, we have been opposed to collective bargaining as an association, but we know that if something is going to pass, we would rather it be optional for local governments to be able to choose and determine your own destiny on those. Other issues out there, we have solar. I don't know if you've been following the solar legislation or not, but the current M&T exemption, the industry is pushing it, trying to push it back to 2034 or 35, which would severely hamper your ability to raise any kind of revenue for solar operations. And we're trying to pull that back, that exemption back to 2021. We don't know that we've not made great headway in that. The solar industry has really hired some powerful lobbyists to push this through, so we're still working on that issue. Another issue is the public defenders. I don't know if you have public defenders here. Most rural localities really don't have public defenders, but there are a lot of places that have public defenders, and there has been a bill that would make it mandatory for you to pay public defenders. Just like you do any kind of supplement you do for your Commonwealth Attorney, you would have to pay that supplement to public defenders also. We have opposed that bill, and thankfully we got that bill killed this year. Other issues, education. Number one funder of any locality is your education. We have re-benchmarking dollars in there. We supported that, but there's other mandates that were put forward by the State Board of Education that seem to be kind of going away. It's a little too early to tell. We got 7 or 8 days left in this session, and things are happening in conference right now. So we hope that we're going to see some additional dollars coming to the education programs without the mandates of additional funding for you all. Employee pay raises. There's a state-supported local employees are provided for in the state in the new state budget in the House and in the Senate. Both are a little different. We don't know what's going to happen with those state-supported employee pay raises, but what that tells me though is that the state is willing to give you all some money for pay increases for your state, for your local people. But you're going to have to match that. It's really going to be on you all to come up with some additional dollars for those employee pay raises. Cancer presumptions. I'm not sure if you've heard from your firefighters, your first responders about the importance of helping them with when they get cancer and them doing their job. But we have been working with the first responders all this past year in developing some legislation that will allow cancer presumption be automatic payment going to them for those cancer presumptions. And so be aware that the advocacy piece is very huge for us, and that's one of the top things we do, and we hope that's one of the things that we would like to get your all's involvement in going forward. Other issues are education. Let me quickly talk about education. We are the preeminent group to provide education to our county officials. VACO VLML Finance, we have a rural caucus, we have a county government day, we have a certified supervisors program, which is nowhere else in the state that has this. We do a supervisors forum, we have crisis communication workshops, solar workshops, any other workshop that may be identified by our members which needs education, which needs additional work, we provide that for our members at no cost to our members. Member engagement. Probably one of the biggest things, the most important things that we do that we have been lauded from our members is that we host regional meetings. We have 13 regions in Virginia, VACO regions, and this past year we were in about 10 of those regions actually having meetings, about a 2.5-hour meeting. We start off with education, we start off with advocacy. We bring your delegates and senators in, let you talk to them, but we also make your delegates and senators stay until they hear from you all and your issues that you have in your county. Fantastic crowds, fantastic membership engagement there. Seems to be going pretty good there. I think you all we've invited you all to participate in a couple of them. Even though you're not members of VACO, we wanted you to come and experience the regional meetings. I think Paul showed up over in Henrico one time. And so we hope to have more of these that will be closer to you all. County Supervisors Manual, we are your research. We are the county's research arm. You may not have staff to do research. You may not have staff to do a lot of advocacy, but we want to be your lobbyist here in Richmond. We want to advocate for counties. We want to do the research, and this is our most recent publication right here. This is our 8th edition of the Virginia County Supervisors Manual, and if you haven't seen this, if you don't have one of these, talk to me and we'll be happy to get you a new manual. Let me quickly finish here and just talk about our business services. We engage with a lot of vendors out there to do deep discount offerings for you all. If you're looking for health insurance, we have working with Aetna, we're working with AP Assets, trying to develop a program that will allow you all to purchase health insurance at a discounted rate for your employees. Good health insurance, though. We want some of the best health insurance, but it puts another option out there for you to look at, for you to evaluate when you're dealing with the Blue Crosses or you're dealing with the other groups that are out there. We also have VACORP. VACORP is an insurance program that we started many years ago that has now spun off, and counties actually own this program. And this is a program that has property and liability insurance for your county. The other one is VACO VML Finance, another one we started that has now spun off, and you all actually, the counties own this VACO VML Finance program, and it's really focused on your investments. You get money in, you get tax money coming in, revenue, and you can park that money and gain interest on that for a certain for a month or for 60 days or for 90 days, and then pull it back out, and it's kind of used as one of those in and out programs that has been very successful for the counties. I can't say it's really been successful for VACO because we don't really get anything off that much, but it is a great program for the counties to be able to put money there. Many other business services that we have gotten sponsorships and partnerships with. I mean, it's just it's a lot, and we do this every day. And this is one of the things that we continue to grow these opportunities for you all to participate at VACO. If you've not looked at our mobile app, everybody has a phone. We have a mobile app now that we highlight all our education programs. We highlight all our advocacy programs, and we highlight all the websites for our member counties throughout the state. Last thing, I know I'm running out of time, Mr. Badesky, but the last thing is dues. To participate in VACO, the FY21 dues would be $4,929, and we would love to have Goochland back as a member of VACO. We have 94 counties. We have 95 counties in Virginia. We have 94 counties members of VACO, and they run our organization. And we would invite you to be a part of our organization and help run VACO and have a voice at the General Assembly, have a voice in our education programs, have a voice in helping us develop a legislative program going forward. And let us help advertise Goochland. I mean, you got West Creek down there, you got Drive Shack that I've actually been to, spent money at. So, I mean, we love to advertise all this tourism stuff. Every year, every time you look at our newsletter, we are promoting tourism. And, it's a shame that we're not promoting tourism in Goochland County. We'd love to. With that, thank you for allowing me to be here, and I hope you will consider us when you look at the budget, when you look at participation in VACO. The money, that is the dues, but even more important for us is we need your participation. It's not just looking for dues at all. It's really looking for your participation in steering committees. Help guide us, help us in developing legislation going forward and what we can do for counties. Thank you all. Be happy to answer any questions. Feel
Okay,
free.
all right, thank you, Mr. Lynch. Any questions from the board at this point? Okay, well, thank you very much. We will
Thank you.
definitely take it under advisement.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, all right, so we're back to Ms. Horlacher.
I should have mentioned at the beginning of my presentation that some of the departments are here to answer any questions if we have about the various individual budgets. The county administrator's budget, personnel costs have gone up, and that is due to, we have a budget in there for a part-time administrative assistant, and as well as an intern. Operating costs are increasing primarily due to some purchase of some social media software that at this time we currently haven't purchased and would like to purchase. The county attorney's budget, there is an increase in personnel costs due to a mid-year promotion, as well as higher VRS costs. I should have mentioned that our VRS costs are set by VRS every 2 years, the same as it goes along with the budget cycle, the state's budget cycle. And we have experienced an increase this year, a full percentage point increase. So we have a relatively low VRS contribution rate of about 8.8, but it is increasing to 9.8. So you will see that a lot of departments have experienced some increases in their personnel costs because of that increase in VRS. We also offer group life through VRS. That's increased a very minor percentage point. And then, of course, you already know, I believe, that our healthcare insurance costs have stayed flat for this year. The operating expenses actually decreased in the county attorney's budget. The human resources has experienced increase in personnel, and that's due to turnover of staff. So sometimes the person coming in doesn't have the exact same salary as the person that left. We also have increased money for employee training. We like to keep a pool of funds in the human resources department for some of our leadership training, like the LMR program or the LEAD program. Commissioner of Revenue's budget, primarily personnel costs are increasing. And again, that is not only the VRS, but also employees can change their life situations can change, and then they will choose a different and sometimes more expensive health insurance. The county assessor's budget, and theirs is all due to, their personnel increases are all due to benefit costs increasing. The other thing I didn't mention as we were going along is that we do have indicated on these slides, if we attribute a certain revenue to that department, for instance, in the Treasurer's Department, we attribute, of course, their comp board money to that. So we have included that on these slides. And theirs is all comp board money, and their personnel costs are actually decreasing, again, due to turnover. The finance budget, personnel costs are increasing because of those mentioned earlier, the VRS going up. Purchasing is benefits increase as well, and then the operating costs are increasing primarily due to we have included the lease for the postage meter, and we actually inadvertently left it out of this year's budget, so that's why it appears to be an increase, but it really should have been in there.
Barbara, before you go on board, I'm starting to hear a little bit more feedback at this meeting. If you can turn your Bluetooth off of your phones, that sometimes has that static effect on the mics in this room. Thank you.
In the information technology budget, you see personnel costs increasing, and that is primarily because we have budgeted for a new GIS analyst position. Operating costs are increasing primarily due to increasing amounts on software maintenance contracts. Excuse me. And then the registrar's budget, the biggest change you see there is in their capital line, and that is that the plan next year is to replace all their poll books. we like to phase in things when we can, but with their poll books, it's good when they're all on the same operating system and they're all the same models. So new poll books, and also purchase a few new of the scanning machines that you actually put your ballot into. And that's because of increased polling places, and also it's important to have spares of that. And all those departments are concerned, of course, with changing requirements and regulations, mandates, increasing workloads. And we are still working overall in the whole area of finance on the implementation of phase 2 of the financial system. And that should go live July 1st. That's our HR payroll. And then the tax portion module, the treasurer and commissioner, it's in their plan to start looking for the software for that in the near future. And so that would be our third phase of that project. So are there any questions? There are a few department heads in the budget. In the room, I'm sorry.
Answer any questions that involve the department heads.
Just a reminder, we do have quite a few of our financial folks here today. So in addition to Ms. Holacker, if you have any questions, I might get off easy. Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. So no questions? All right, so
I'm sorry, just, board, just want to respect your time and all the folks in the room's time today. Do you want to reserve some time at the end for all the folks to answer further? Or do you feel like, at least related to those departments, you either have what you need, or we can reach out later on your behalf? If everyone's
I think we're good.
Certainly think folks may have other things to do, so the department has just been covered.
I think you've just been dismissed. But thank you.
Thank you.
Robin, that includes you, but you're welcome to stay.
Come on down.
Just for the record, Robin Lynn, Secretary of the Electoral Board. I just want to express my appreciation to Ms. Holaker and to the County Administrator for the extraordinary interest they've taken in our department. And to give you a small heads up, I'm very pleased to announce that we have now gone over 19,000 registered voters in the county for the first time. And that in our budget, I believe the state has, after we've been working on it for 12 years, and year after year you have supported our request, that the state give a full reimbursement to localities as required by code. That's in the budget. Whether it survives the next 2 weeks, we'll get a little bit of money back, which we should have been getting all along. We do have a possibility of coming back to ask for a supplement, because as Mr. Lynch was talking about, the unfunded mandates coming down for the 45-day absentee voting, no excuse, might create a bulge for us at the Registrar's office. If it does, if we have the North Carolina experience that absentee voting goes from 5 to 8% up to 30 or 40%, it will reduce our long-term costs back and forth like that. And the wild card is what we might be required to do for cybersecurity. We don't know. But, excuse me, Barbara. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lynn. Appreciate it. Okay, all right.
The Judicial Administration Departments. The first department we'll look at is our circuit court budget, and that's for all civil cases of more than $25,000. Concurrent authority with the General District Court, 4501 to 25,000. divorces, property disputes, adoptions, name changes, and civil appeals from the General District Court and the Juvenile Domestic Relations Court, disputes concerning wills and estates, and all felony cases, and misdemeanor and traffic appeals from those two courts. This budget they have a small budget, and the major expense in this budget is sharing the cost of the judge's secretary. So the Louisa pays for the secretary, and we share in the cost of that secretary. So there's just a minor increase there. We also have our General District Court, and it is all criminal, traffic, and civil cases up to $15,000, and all preliminary hearings on felony cases. And they are actually experiencing, again, we just give a small amount of support. The people down at General District Court are state employees, and we give them a small amount of operating support, and that is actually going down this year. The clerk of the court has 4 primary functions. The clerk serves as the clerk of the circuit court, the probate official, the recorder of deeds, and the county clerk. You see operating personnel costs, and again, that is going up slightly, and that is, again, an increase or change in benefits to VRS or health insurance. Operating costs are actually going down a little bit. Revenues in the clerk of the circuit court's office are made up of course, the comp board money, and the clerk of the court copy fee. The amount she collects, she turns that back over to the county. The technology grant that she usually gets every year, and also the non-reverting funds that she contributes to her budget and then uses for things like education. And also, usually annually, she receives a grant from the Library of Virginia for the deed books and the restoration of the deed books. The Commonwealth Attorney's office, the primary responsibilities for prosecuting criminal cases in the Circuit Court, General District Court, and the Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court, and appellate proceedings in the Virginia Supreme Court and Court of Appeals. And they also do in that office victim witness advocacy. So in their budget, you see also change in benefit options and cost, and their revenue is both comp board and the victim witness grant revenue. So they get, for the victim witness program, they get some of their costs reimbursed. A small portion of that is state, and a larger portion of that is federal money. And the future issues for these departments, of course, is the lack of space and the security concerns down there will still be ongoing as the use of that facility gets greater and greater. So do you have any questions on those departments? I believe the clerk of the court is here if you have any questions for her.
Any questions from the board? No. I do have one. Ms. Agnew, I think about 4 years ago, we stopped charging the county portion of the CHP, and we're still doing that, right, obviously. Is that a budget implication for you? That's really not shown in here, right? It's just money you're not getting. If you don't mind, yeah, that'd be great.
Dale Agnew, clerk. Now, I believe, I know that it's a sheriff's prerogative as to whether or not we collect that $35 that comes to the county. And he was, the retired sheriff was encouraged by the board to stop collecting it, and at that point, I got a letter
Right.
pursuant to you all's request
Right.
that he stopped charging. At that time, we did. There still is a $15 fee. That $15 covered for the state, and that covers 5 years. So we are not collecting it. We've seen a tremendous increase in concealed weapons permits. It's crazy.
Okay, so we still have to collect the part that we
For the
send,
state.
but not our portion. And
We do
that's
not
still the
collect-
same way it's been.
Yeah, and it will be that way until unless I get a letter from the sheriff asking that we
Got
start
you.
collecting it. That's the only way, that's the law.
Okay.
And different jurisdictions are doing different things. Some are collecting, it's $25 instead of the $35, giving customers a $10 break. I just read an email from a clerk this morning. But many are now looking to give breaks on those.
Right,
Yeah, but we
okay.
certainly have a lot of them.
Yeah, do you know how many we have? I think the sheriff had given us a number at one point,
yeah.
I think.
2,760.
Oh, to be, yeah, that's
that
a
what-
guess, right?
It is it's an educated
Yeah.
guess. I know within 20. That's
Wow.
right. Mhm.
Okay,
I keep track of it.
I bet you do.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, okay. I thank you for that.
Okay.
Any other questions while she's here? Okay, thank you. Okay. Back to Ms. Horlacker.
If there are no further questions, I get.
Oh, yeah, that's right, we're down. Okay. No other questions, and I guess the utilities would be next. Matt Longshore will present the utilities budget.
Okay. You're welcome.
All right, good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the board, Matt Longshore, Director of Public Utilities. I will be presenting the department updates and the proposed FY21 budget this afternoon. After that, I'll be happy to take some questions, and then I'm going to turn the TCSD update portion over back to Ms. Horlacker, so she only gets a brief break.
Okay.
So starting out, we have several core functions of what we do. The main one being provide quality water and wastewater services to our customers. We currently serve over 1,700 residential and commercial customers. And that number is quickly growing, especially on the residential side with developments such as Reader's Branch, Mosaic, which is H.H. Hunt, Parkside Village build-out, and other developments coming online. So over the next few years, we're really anticipating that number growing rapidly. In order to do this, we operate and maintain approximately 150 miles of pipeline, 7 sewer pump stations, 2 water booster stations, and 3 water storage tanks. Another function of ours is to be transparent in everything we do. All of our guiding documents are on our website for the world to see, and we encourage our residents to go look at them. That includes our utility master plan, our standard specifications, as well as our 2018 rate study. So we want to make sure our residents know how we make decisions and kind of what guides those decisions. Some of our goals are to set industry and exceed industry standards in safety, technology, and knowledge. All of our operators are 30-hour OSHA certified, and all of our operators are certified waterworks operators through the state of Virginia. We also have 2 professional engineers on staff, and so I can tell you having that amount of professional experience on staff is quite exceptional for a small locality. Additionally, we want to address all emergencies in an expeditious manner, and these are customers calling in with a potential leak, with a potential sewer smell in their neighborhood, anything of that nature. When we take those calls, we make those a top priority and make sure one of our operators can make it by there, again, in a very expeditious manner. So along those lines, we try to provide exceptional customer service to all of our customers, and we want to make sure any customer or any stakeholder of our system, and that's what our customers are. When they pay rates, they pay into our system. They are stakeholders of the public system. We want to make sure they have a positive experience when they deal with our department. That said, let's take a look at our proposed FY21 operating budget. So a couple of the highlights of the budget, one of the more glaring things you may see is the increase of about $800,000 for FY21 over FY20. I can tell you the big reason for that increase is approximately $600,000 being budgeted to go towards our recently set up R&R funds. So I can tell you in our industry, R&R stands for rehab and replace, and it's funds that we have recently set up to prepare us for the future to be able to fund a major infrastructure rehab and replacement project. So I can tell you right now, we currently enjoy having a relatively young public infrastructure. Most of the pipes, pump stations, whatnot in our system are less than 25 years old, which in the utilities world is that's a spring chicken. So that's not always going to be the case. And so we're starting to budget to prepare for that now. So in 20, 25, 30 years, we're able to fund large improvement projects. Another big item you may see up here is we are asking for one more position in FY21. That position will be in our customer service center, and we're asking for another customer service specialist. We currently have one customer service specialist on staff, and she does a fantastic job. But we're starting to get a customer base where she's starting to need some help. So, currently she serves over, and we all do, but definitely on the customer service side, over 1,700 customers, and that number, again, is rapidly growing. I just tallied some calendar year 2019 figures, and for our customer service phone line alone last year, we took over 10,000 calls. So that line is very busy, and again, the more meters, the more customers we get on our system, the more that number is going to go up. So we're trying to prepare ourselves now to be able to provide that level of customer service. That position will, again, provide redundancy for answering the calls, but also in billing. We do all of our billing in-house, which is a massive undertaking every 2 months. So that position also deals with putting in service orders for our operators, purchasing items, checking invoices, all of those administrative tasks. So that's where we stand with that. A couple developments in our budget. Operationally, you'll see some increases and decreases in our budget as you go through different items. Some that may stand out is you'll see a decrease in professional services. This is due to our master plan update being completed this year, and that money no longer needed in that item for next year. But you also see increases in equipment and maintenance costs, and it's kind of a good thing to have. We're getting more customers on our system, but those customers mean we're buying more meters. So there's an increase for that. We'd also like to install a tank mixer in our courthouse tank next fiscal year, so we put some money in the budget for that. Also, we'd like to purchase a robotic sewer camera, and the main thing that will do is assist our operators in finding and detecting issues in our sewer system. So those are some of the highlights that you may see going through our items. We've also included an increase in water and sewer purchases from Henrico, and those are to match our usage projections. And I think it should be noted, when we look at our usage projections, a lot of the residential customers that we anticipate coming on our system over the next few years will have irrigation systems. And I can tell you from really the months of April to around November, irrigation is the single highest driver of water usage on the east end of the county. So when we look at those projections, we always try to include things like that to make sure we're covered when it comes to being able to purchase water from Henrico County. Some highlight accomplishments we completed this past year. And honestly, I work in the trenches every day. I think getting our daily tasks done is an accomplishment, but we do have some real true highlights this past year. One of those being the completion of the Old Oaks water service project. This was a $1.8 million service project where we and a team, including our engineer and our contractor, improved and extended an existing Aqua Virginia water system to serve the Old Oaks neighborhood in Crozier. This project was paid for by DEQ. It was a state-funded project, but make no mistake, with the amount of time, with the amount of staff time that was spent, Goochland County made quite a big investment in the success of this project. So I did want to highlight that. A couple other accomplishments, highlight accomplishments, is we completed an interjurisdictional pre-treatment agreement with the City of Richmond. Some of you may remember that from earlier last year. That was a 2-year, pretty big heavy lift in negotiating back and forth with the city and making sure our wastewater treatment needs are met going forward. So quite a heavy lift on that. We also, as part of that, are continuing our wastewater sampling program, which we're in our 3rd year of doing that. And one thing to note that kind of flew under the radar this past year, but is noteworthy, is that we received what's called local review authority from the Virginia Department of Health. And a lot of that has to do, there's a couple check boxes you need to check to get that type of authority. And what it is we had the sole ability to approve waterline construction plans in our department without necessarily having to check for every single set of plans with VDH. And what this does is help us improve our response time, especially when it comes to developers. So in order to get that, you have to have a certain amount of experience on staff. You have to have a certain number of PEs. Thankfully, we met those check marks this year. They approved our authority, and we feel that will better serve our development community. So very excited about that. VA 811 and damage prevention. We responded to over 3,600 utility locate tickets this past year. So that was, just doing the math, that's quite remarkable. VA 811, one of the biggest kind of misconceptions about VA 811 is when a contractor calls in, I'm sure everyone's heard call before you dig. When a contractor calls in, a lot of them think VA 811 actually comes out and marks utilities. That is completely incorrect. What VA 811 does is determines what utilities could be impacted in the area of that excavation, and then it alerts the utility owners in that area to then go out and mark their own utilities. So we're a member of the VA 811 organization. Again, we marked over 3,600 tickets last year, and that's been quite an accomplishment. We see that number honestly going up going forward with all the construction on the east end of the county. And if you will remember, with the approval of the the FY20 budget last year, you approved a position a utility locator position, full-time position just for us, just to do this, just to mark utilities. And I can tell you that's made a world of difference for our operators. So with just having one employee marking all these tickets, it keeps that one employee extremely busy, but it also lets our operators focus on operations. So that's been quite a success. A couple future outlook and challenges. We always are going to monitor our system for water pressures and quality, make sure our customers have a good experience on our system. And there's always room for improvement in that area, and we're always looking for ways to improve the system. So along the development lines and construction lines, We're going to review all the proposed development plans and make sure they're technically compliant with our standards, as well as state standards and federal standards. That's one of the most important things we do as far as accepting infrastructure on behalf of the county. We want to make sure when developers build public infrastructure that we're taking over a quality product. Along those lines, is we want to maintain responsiveness towards all the stakeholders in future utility construction projects. Rates. All right. So just to give you a quick background, back in FY18, we commissioned a rate study, and what we did is we hired a consultant named Draper Radin to take a look at our finances, and we opened up our books. We asked them to look at our rates, but we also asked them to look at our existing expenses and other things such as connection fees, CIP, and also R&R funds. And we asked them to take a look at that, not only for the current conditions, but give us a 5-year projection on where we need to go with our rates and kind of help guide us on how to get there. One of the big recommendations that came out of that rate study was that in order to give us a balanced budget, and this was back in FY18, so we made some headway since then, but in order to give us a balanced budget back then, we would need water rate increases of 28% and sewer rate increases of 70%. The board back then, that obviously wasn't a palatable increase, and I don't think it would have been to our customers as well. So we decided to take a more feasible approach back then to have 5% increases on water and 6% on sewer, consecutive increases over the next 5 years. And again, that's what we're recommending this year for FY21. This will be the third year of that implementation. One of the big takeaways for that, if you go back to kind of the high-level view of the budget, you'll notice our expenditures were less than our revenues for FY19. So one of the big things the rate study outlined is the need to start making significant contributions now to our R&R funds, and this is really what led to a lot of these recommendations. And so you'll see the third bullet point there is these increases will continue to allow for our R&R fund investments. So what did these rate increases look like for the average residential customer? For a typical customer at 4,000 gallons of water usage, and that is the minimum water usage by code, for water it'd be $1.89 every 2 months. And for wastewater, it will be $3.93 every 2 months, and that's on the bi-monthly bill. So the total increase will be $5.82 on a bi-monthly bill for 4,000 gallons of usage. What we're asking is for you to consider these rate adjustments on during a public hearing on April 7th, and then for you to adopt the rates on April 21st. If those were approved and adopted, these rates would go into effect on July 1st. So with that, I will be happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay. Thank you for that. Any questions from the board? Mr. Spoonhour.
Mr. Longshore, thank you so much for everything you do. Loved being able to see the tour, and when I ran for this, I never realized it'd be getting to see such a pretty impressive operation. I want to start by saying I'm a huge fan of customer service and being able to answer calls when they come in.
Right.
The 10,000 calls for 1,700 customers raises questions for me. And if we're looking to staff, I'd love to, can you talk a little bit more about those
Sure.
types of calls? Because from a utility perspective, you could, obviously more people than customers are calling, but that's almost 6 calls per customer.
Right.
So could you talk a little bit more about
So
that?
some of those calls, you're absolutely correct. Those are the call numbers we get from the IT department that come through. A lot of them are answered. Some of them are repeat calls that may not have gotten answered the first time. I can tell you from those calls on that line, that led to 32 hours straight of conversation throughout the year. So But a lot of those calls are quick, and are 32 hours. I'm sorry. 32 hours, I'm sorry, 254 hours of conversation. Let's look at the wrong number. So anyways, but a lot of those calls are short and they're intermittent. And what they do is they break up the workflow of what our staff's already working on, as I'm sure you already know. So that's what we're hoping that the second position will do, is help kind of stabilize that and being able to answer all those calls as they come in. Another thing we're working on internally is potentially coming up with optional menus for our customers if the line is busy, so they don't feel that they may need to hang up and do a repeat call. They may have other options to get that information, again, if our line is tied up. If it's not tied up, we're always going to try to answer it right away.
All right, thank you. Yes, Mr. Sharp.
The $600,000 that you said you're setting up with the R&R fund,
Yes, sir.
is that coming primarily from the rate increases?
So the rate increases contribute to that, but the R&R fund, I can tell you, is solely funded by the operational budget. And so what we do, and I think Ms. Horlacher can speak a little more to this, is every year we look at our expenditures and we look at our revenues, and then hopefully we see the difference in overage in revenues versus our expenditures, and that way we can decide how much we can actually contribute to the R&R funds. So when you predict what your revenues are going to be, especially what's driven by rates, sometimes those are really hard to predict. We've been pretty close in past years, but one rainy year, because irrigation is such a huge driver of usage, can drive some of those revenues down. On the other hand, one year full of drought can drive the revenues up because people are using a lot more irrigation. So those are things we look at. But at the end of the day, to hopefully answer your question, that's what we anticipate we're going to be able to contribute to the R&R funds, and some of that will come from rate increases.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, Mr. Lumpkins?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Longshore.
Yes, sir.
On slide 4, can you jump back to slide 4?
Absolutely.
I've just got a few questions on the first part of your presentation, and then a follow-up
Okay.
to Mr. Sharp and on the rates. So you're adding an FTE, but with raises, when I reviewed this last week, with the raises and one FTE, the 39,000 seemed much lower than what I would have imagined.
Hopefully Barbara can help
That does
me.
not include
What's that
raises.
be like?
So what we do with raises, and despite what I know the book says, because it's sort of boilerplate, that we, until the board adopts the raise, we kind of keep the amount for raises aside as and then we allocate them out once the board says, yes, we're going to go with the 2%.
Okay, so when you were talking about earlier increases in personnel, you were mentioning VRS. Do we not have the VRS?
The VRS is in there. VRS is in there.
So still
but
with the VRS,
The 2% that we're anticipating is not.
and that's not in any of the numbers you've been presenting?
Right, that's sort of set aside right now as a bucket for raises, and then we'll allocate it into the adopted budget.
Okay, I still think $40,000 after VRS and one full FTE, but it's not a big item. I just paused on that when I did my review initially.
And it could be that other things have offset it, so, it could be that someone changed their health plan and we're paying less, so.
Or maybe a vacancy for a while or something, or anticipated
Right.
vacancy.
Right,
Okay.
so.
So, might stay up here, because my next question is on the operating costs. I think my question on that was, I couldn't figure out what that jump was until I saw on page 233, I think, of the budget book. 233, 234, where we did a $500,000 transfer.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find my notes on that.
That, I believe, that's the transfer to the general fund to pay back the loan the general fund had made.
For some
Wait,
reason, yeah, I see
Are
a
you looking
five,
at the TCSD or at the operating budget?
I must be looking at page 234, the T.
Pretty certain that's what it is.
Yeah, for some reason, I thought we were done with that. When I first got on the board, I know we did one of those transfers, and I thought there were no more, but
We have multiple years. It ends
On
actually
page
next year.
234,
That is-
that's $500,000 transfer, so I
That is
figured,
from the TCSD to the general fund.
does that make up, does that the delta here for the operating cost, or is that part of the
No,
755?
all you're seeing in this particular slide is the operating budget. There's a separate slide for the TCSD budget.
So then I'm going back to my question that I had when I was first reviewing this. What is that 755,000 made up? I could not,
And primarily, it is, it's on page 232. It is also a fund transfer between funds, but it's the 583 that you see, 583,000 that you see about
what line number? About
halfway down, 495500, fund transfer.
fund transfer, okay, there we go.
And that is for the R&R. And we should probably label those things so
Yeah,
that
probably
we can
would
tell
help,
better,
yeah.
but that is for the R&R.
And I think it should be noted, this is the first year, as you can see on that table, that it's actually been budgeted for.
But we've been funding it in the past?
Only in the past, only last year, and that, basically Matt came to me at the end of the year and says, looks like we did okay, can we set some of that money aside for the R&R? So we went ahead and started it last year, which we were supposed to do per the rate study, but then we decided that, we should actually be budgeting for it.
And so back to the Tuckahoe Creek Service District piece, we have another year or two of that $500,000
Yeah, I think
transfer?
21 is the last full year, and then on 22, I believe there's a small amount, like 100 and some thousand yet to pay back the general fund.
So what you're telling me is our budget is pretty close to last year's actual, and the 16% increase is more of just it's a delta between budgets, but not so much if our proposed budget is
It
kind of
works
in line with last year or the current year's actual.
Right. Right. It's,
That's right.
even though we were able to come ahead on the budget and put money into the R&R fund this year, we are budgeting for it.
I'll just look at some of the random questions that I had a bunch of questions that I sent to y'all after last weekend. I'll pull a few of them out that if you answered them already, I apologize. I was wondering, why did we miss the 2020 budget projection for the Henrico cost sharing?
So is that the 1.3 versus the 1.6 from previous years, Mr. Lumpkins?
I believe so. That's one thing I did not put a note where page I found that. So wherever I can try to search quickly for it.
So I believe the page you mentioned showed anticipated revenues is what we budgeted, and I can tell you for that 1.6 million.
Right,
when that-
it's page 230.
Yeah.
Line number 316450, Henrico cost sharing sewer.
So those are anticipated revenues, those aren't expenditures. I can tell you when the 1.6 million was budgeted as an anticipated revenue. At that time, and this has kind of a little backstory to it, but we purchased a lot of a really expensive chemical called dioxide at our Eastern Goochland pump station. It's actually our single highest expense in our budget. We have it budgeted this year at 1.7 million. We share that cost with Henrico County.
Don't they pay all of it?
They do not pay all of it. Back when the 1.6 million was budgeted, we were paying 5%, they were paying 95%.
Okay.
After that, we started paying it on a flow-based pay. So if 80% of the flow through that station If they have 80%, we have 20%, we pay 20%, they pay 80%. So that's why those have been adjusted moving forward.
Gotcha,
That
okay.
sounds like a good thing, yep.
Yeah. On 234, on the budget, I was trying to figure out our significant change in interest on proposed expenses, page 234.
And again, that's the TCSD.
Right, yep, I know, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around between TSCD and utilities, but,
You're looking at
dropped-
the interest expense?
yeah, it dropped substantially between 19 actual and 20 budget.
Right, and
That was
so the way, so accounting methods and budget methods are sometimes apples to oranges. So when you say actuals, that's what the actually showed, the books showed. It's not necessarily a cash expenditure. And in the case of the TCSD, you have to recognize the accreted interest that was earned, which is non-cash. So it looks like our interest expense was much higher, but what cash went out the door was just our debt service. So that's why the budget reflects the actual debt service. The actuals reflect what the books reflected, so to speak, and those are kind of on two different accounting terms. But the budget is what's going out the door in cash, and the budget is very easy to get correct in terms of you know what your debt service is going to be, so there's no going off the budget there. We always keep to the budget in terms of the cash that's actually spent.
Gotcha, okay.
Mr. Tompkins,
Yep.
before you leave, Barbara, I understood that because we talk similar language sometimes. I think the fundamental question is, and I know the parens don't make this conversation any easier, and these are actually the revenue side of the equation. Your question's fundamentally is, are we losing interest from year to year? I think that's,
No, his question's actually on the expense side. So he's saying, are
Is it-
we paying like a large amount of interest one year and then not as much next year? Wouldn't that be sort of a flat number? And it is. It's based on your debt service, and it's a flat number. But
Yeah, we were at 5 million, 5.5 million in 19. You budgeted 3.5 million
Right.
in 20, and your request is,
in the
is
accounting
close.
world, sometimes what you recognize on the books as an expense is not a cash expense. It's a non-cash expense.
Sure.
So what cash
I
will
do
go out
understand,
the
I think,
door, and
I
that's
think
how
of
you budget. You budget
depreciation
on
would be what comes to mind, but I don't think of it in terms of interest as being something that you don't really pay.
Ordinarily, that'd be the case. Here we got the zero coupon, so the difference is cash accounting versus accrual accounting.
Correct.
Oh, that
Does that clear that up?
works. That works for me.
Okay.
Oh, we have a winner.
This accretion, that kind of lose me when you talking about accreting interest or
We
something.
have a special kind of debt in the TCSD that's a little different than most debt. You don't just pay interest, you pay principal. We have something that it actually, because of the structure of the TCSD and the ability to pay, and we actually are building interest. We have something called capital appreciation bonds, which means that you're actually building interest, whereas in a mortgage, you pay as you go, you pay your interest, it's always current. We're actually building up interest, and that's not an enviable position to be in, but it's the type of debt we have. And so we're actually increasing our amount of interest that ultimately we're gonna have to pay back, and so.
Did I hear you, Mr. Peterson, say negative amortization?
It's a negative, and we're paying a portion of our cash, or a portion of our interest expense in cash. The balance is being capitalized and added to principal, and it'll come due at maturity.
And that's just because that's the way it worked out. I understand. There's
And
a
that's the way
long
it's
story to that.
Yeah.
That's the way it was structured back in 2002.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
So on this, a couple more questions on the utility CIP. I think, Matt, you may have covered a few of these things, but again, I
Sure.
see a huge jump from 2.7, 2.8 million in 19 to 614 requested?
Sure. So in FY19, a lot of those funds were construction funds for our Hickory Haven Seminary Forest Sewer Project. Those were appropriated back in FY19 or FY20, whenever they're shown.
They're 19, and then 2020, original budget was $1 million. How are we doing, and is 2020 budget close to actual?
So
Are you talking specifically about connection fees?
Construction, it's under the construction bucket. This,
Some on
I've jumped around on you, I'm on CIP now.
it was,
Right.
I'm sorry, it was $750 for the courthouse wastewater treatment plant engineering study and $250 for the chloramine booster station expansion, which we're just receiving final plans for that, and we're have some stuff in the works for the courthouse treatment plant. I'd be happy to share with you,
So
but
the mixer you just mentioned in your presentation, the courthouse mixer, is that in the request for this year?
that's in the operational request for repairs and maintenance. It's not actually in the CIP.
Okay,
So, in going to the 614,000 number we're requesting for this next year, what we've done is push back a couple projects that were previously set for this upcoming year. We pushed those back a year or two as we felt like we would have the capacity to complete those projects. And what we did was we had $307,000 for the engineering of the Huguenot Hills water service project, and another $307 for the engineering of their sewer project. So what we've done is actually put both those engineering costs in the same year, so we can engineer both water and sewer for that project at the same time, and we're hoping to see substantial cost savings by doing it that way versus the way it was previously broken out.
thank you.
Check with Clerk, yes.
Couple more questions. I got one on rates, but before I jump to rates, your budget shares the fact that you plan to present the board with an updated utilities master plan. I think the budget says in the spring of 2020, so that should be, I guess, probably right at the conclusion of the budget process. What I would ask you and the county administrator, it seems to me in our budget decision or budget review, it might be helpful. I mean, this plan must be in a pretty good draft form if you're going to be presenting it to us in a few months. I would love to, I think it would help us perhaps, just my opinion, that maybe seeing the framework or the key points in that plan might help us understand a little bit of the budget, before we vote on a budget and then look at a plan that's apparently almost done.
Yeah, Mr. Lumpkin, just spoiler alert, there's nothing in the next fiscal year for you to approve, even in the utilities master plan. It's coming forward to you. And so that is coming in draft to you April, May timeframe. We have it lined up for 2x2s.
That's correct.
And so even once you get it, we don't have projects planned that will influence the budget year that you're looking to adopt. So you will have some opportunity, even once you see it, to make amendments. Even in the, we intentionally didn't take on more work than we could in the upcoming fiscal year. So there will be flexibility that if we want to look at projects the year beyond and out, for some flexibility to move things around.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, on rates.
Sure.
I get it, I wasn't around back when the study was done and the daunting numbers, and it looks like we're still just trying to bite off that piece. It's small bites, bite off that big
That's right.
That's right.
thing with small bites. But when you see 5 to 6% rate increases, I guess it's not as far as we can see into the future, but we're in year 3 of a 5-year deal. Is that what you said?
We're in 3, yeah, that's correct. FY21 will be the 3rd year implementation of a 5-year implementation. So that's absolutely right. The initial recommendations that came out of the report were fairly insurmountable and obviously not palatable to put those in place. So what we did is we try to break that up into smaller increments so it wouldn't be as big of an impact to our customers. It's still trying to make up that gap. Now, as more and more customers come on our system, there is an economy to scale here. The more people you have paying into a pool, the more hopefully funds you'll see to be able to apply and start making up that gap. So we are trying to keep track of that, and as far as development goes, and potentially we may be looking at having Draper Rating or a likewise consultant, maybe take another look at the rate study in the upcoming years to see kind of what's changed in the past. And
Very, very, very good. You went exactly where
Right.
where my next, perfect, thank you, great answer. Because my question was, are we looking at the study and are we measuring against, because, I mean, are all the assumptions and the data in the study still holding out? That's, I hope we're testing it and not just got a study and then closed our eyes and braced for 5 and 6% increases for,
Right, right, absolutely. We look at it every year, and especially when the actuals come in as to what was, generally predicted back in FY18. And believe it or not, the rate study has been fairly accurate. I mean, you are projecting out 5 years into the future, but it has been
so
pretty.
the growth numbers are, the study's growth numbers are.
It has, with one small nuance. We're seeing we're behind the study a little bit, generally by around a year. The reason we attribute to that is the study was done before the proffer law changed, and what the proffer law did was hold back some development we were counting on for essentially a year. So it may have held back those projects. And in the rate study, if you look line by line as the development it was relying on in its numbers, that development was taking, it could be up to a year longer to actually bring those customers online. So that's kind of what we're seeing. We're lagging a little bit behind, potentially maybe a year or so behind, but looking at the big picture, the rate study has been, number one, an incredible tool for us, but it has been fairly accurate as well.
Well, thank you. Good presentation. You give me confidence that y'all are watching things closely. Thank you.
Yes, sir, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, absolutely. So I guess anything else on Tuckahoe Creek or?
Barbara's going to cover that.
Oh, Barbara is always good. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. We always review the budget for the Tuckahoe Creek Service District along with considering the utilities operating budget. So this is the budget, but just basically what the TCSD budget does is collect the cash from the two different, the main sources, and then we pay the interest with that. So the obligations we know we have are, of course, to the VRA with the revenue bonds and accreted interest is now at $93.9 million. The City of Richmond wastewater treatment capacity charges and what we owe to them is $22.6 million. And then there's still the outstanding general fund loan. The major sources of revenue, of course, are the ad valorem tax of 32 cents and then the 55% of the real estate tax paid on revenue sharing properties after the application of land use credits and above the base value that was set in 2004. So this is a very old slide back from September 2011, and it shows some of the different things so the green dotted line is what originally was anticipated in 2002. The blue line is what they expected to actually happen prior to the refinancing, and the purple line is the outlook after the 2012 refinancing. So as you see, the 2012 refinancing made all the difference in the world to the financial health of the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. And this is just a slide of the rate. It's been steady, 32 cents for some time now, and the values increased, continue to increase in the Tuckahoe Creek Service District. This is shows you the debt service. No, this is only the debt service for Tuckahoe Creek Service District, the VRA debt. And this is graphed against a bar graph of the two major sources of revenue, the blue being the ad valorem tax and the orange being the 55% revenue sharing. And as you see, the ad valorem tax never entirely covers the debt service. It couldn't be covered without the 55% revenue sharing. So during the past several years, we restarted the repayment of the general fund loan in FY17, and it should be completed in FY22. And we also accelerated our payments to Richmond, and so it's anticipated that they will be $1 million a year, and FY21 would be the third year of that arrangement. So the plan currently is to maintain the ad valorem rate at 32 cents, to continue repayment of the general fund loan, continue to repay Richmond, retain the TCSD fund balance. We had about $7 million in cash at the end of the year in the TCSD fund, and of course the reserve that's required at the U.S. Bank is approximately $13.5 million, and then there's also an additional reserve in the general fund of $1 million. And this is another rate that will be considered at the public hearing on April 7th, as well as adopted on April 21st. And any questions about the TCSD?
Mr. Peterson.
Yeah. Barbara, if you can go back to, I think it was slide 22. One more. There we go. This shows in 2012 we did the debt restructuring, and the purple line was a result from that. I'm trying to interpolate here. This is 2021. The ad valorem tax would be about 65 cents now if we had not done that. I guess you'd have to add that to the 53 as well, so we'd be well above $1.10, $1.20. It'd be
Right, if without the refinancing.
yeah. Now the way we've been able to keep the 32 flat is the assessed value is increased. So this basically said that if your assessed value doesn't increase, then the tax rate would have to go up to pay the debt service. If you go to the next slide, you can see that the assessed value went up enough to allow us to keep the 32 cents flat. So one of the two of them had to go up. Fortunately, it was the assessed value and not the rate. So that's all I wanted to point out. Thank you.
Good point. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Ms. Horlock. All right. Let's see, does she have anything else here? Says, I'm sorry. Yeah. If you don't mind, Mr. Kilduff, we'll take about let's see, about a 10-minute break. Sorry to make you wait, but.
Yeah, we didn't save the shortest for last.
Sure, it's rewarding. Good stuff. Yeah, I got a Google alert. Open up, there's a picture in the back of your head. I was like, I know that.
I'm trying to flip one time. We did go somewhere good shape. We just did. Okay.
Yeah, but it, yeah, absolutely.
That's fun.
Good stuff.
I never thought I'd get into this. And that's something. I mean, this is not my. All good for me. Gotcha. All right, yeah, a few minute break here.
You met Mr. Spindler.
Just sticking around, huh? I don't understand how they get away with it. They're supposed to reimburse it. They just say, oh yeah, budget overruns everywhere. It overruns all they could. Nice.
They legislate, which they're not supposed to, but they use.
They legislate the budget.
At the same time, I have to say, we're happy for that because there was a water tower right there at State Farm. That new water tower that they got that money in the state budget.
What do I got a list of questions? How are you doing? Nice to meet you. What do I got a list of questions for you? Do you?
You should. You should. I feel like, all right, Mr. Gills, my first of number 50.
Yeah, exactly.
It's there.
He's trying to keep us in line. Yeah.
We've heard that even when we advertised them from November last time we were out there. Who are you? Why are you out Last time we did it, literally, drove, drove, we went up, the bike road, almost to where it hit Whitehall. I mean, so pretty far distance from when you're starting. And then, so I went back, dropped off some stuff, and then turned around and went back. As soon as I passed off, it's like a bomb went off, as almost all the trash we just picked up just got dumped over here. That's how it went. She's our deputy clerk, but then she's doing that.
More trash in that. Squealed like a little girl.
All right, she'll take off. I see it everywhere. Great stuff. Every little bit helps. You gave me the. Oh, my brother lives up there. It's different. It is. Yeah, I go up once a month, visit, and then come back to stay. Come back to the real world.
Thanks, I'll, yeah, they're not as excited about the tax authority. It's, well, that's it, but they agree with it. They just spend much time talking about it publicly. But, you know, I'll call you with questions and, all right, thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, well, thanks for coming. Thanks for staying through some of the minutia.
I think you have mine. I think you checked.
I was like, I wouldn't, thank you. It
No
did
problem.
seem like it was, something was
A little
wrong.
taller.
Well, good. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, so he's going to do,
All of CD. You know, all your staff are behind you, so if you misstate anything.
We had like mirrors, like side view mirrors where you can, or in rear view.
it's like this cutest joke I saw, like, oh God, years ago, a woman had traveled off, like a minivan, a bunch of kids in the back seat. The kid behind was kicking her seat, kicking her seat, right? And she's like, all right, that's enough. Who's behind me? And they all sit together. We all are, Mom. We're behind you 100%. It just shows the play of words, right? Yeah. Okay, we about ready to get started, board? Okay. All right, Mr. Kilduff is going to present the community development portion of the budget.
All right, Madam
Thank you very
Chair,
much.
members of the board, Mr. Badesky, I want to thank you for this opportunity to present actually a few departments here, a few offices. We have community development, which is comprised of several different offices, as well as the economic development. And I do want to say that I think this was the first year I did not present the public utilities budget. So it's in good hands. Matt, I think, did a really good job, but was a little sad not presenting that for the first time in probably seven years. But but I think Matt did a great job. So I also want to thank real quick the staff that's sitting behind me. Budgets are not created just in 1 hour. It's a process that takes several months, and I think the individuals behind me, the department heads, and even the staff that have chipped in and put in the work to put together these budgets, put in the other staffing plans and things like that. It takes a lot of work to go through those things, and I do want to thank them while they're all sitting here. But moving into the presentation. For community, we have a few different departments here. Community Development Administration, that's actually just myself and Ashley Parker. She's the Customer Service Center Manager. But in CD Admin, we actually manage several different things and administer several different things throughout the entire department, from CD Admin to our Customer Service Center, environmental, planning, zoning, and building inspections. So our budget, as with some of the other budgets with just 1.3 people, isn't all that difficult to explain. Personnel costs decreased just a little bit, nothing major there, but on the operating side, small decrease, about $1,300. That was really just because we have 2 Xerox machines. One of them does colors and one does colors that you have to pay for. We just do the colors that you don't have to pay for on the one Xerox. There's a little bit of a reduction there. We didn't figure that out until we started looking through some of those tiny line items that you look through, and we found that one and we said, hey, this is a no-brainer. And as far as the staff go, you see at the bottom 1.3, that's the 0.3 is myself, because another 0.3 is in public utilities, another 0.3 is in economic development department. Our challenge is maintaining our high level of customer excellence. We actually do customer service center cards for maybe some of the new board members that didn't know that. We do track those every time they come in. We punch in the numbers. We keep track of the comments. I think we average somewhere around 4.8 out of 5 frequently. And anytime somebody has a suggestion, we do our best to follow up with that suggestion. And some of the suggestions we've been hearing most recently relate to the second bullet point there, which is a new permitting software program that we're trying to implement. It's going to take probably 18 to 24 months to do so. But the comments we get is, I want to pay online. I want to pay with my credit card, my permit. I don't want to go into your office every single time. So we think that'll solve itself when we move forward with that. Planning and Zoning Department. You see these individuals frequently at a lot of our public hearings. They do so many different things, from interacting with the Board of Supervisors, Planning Commission, other agencies. They also administer our zoning and subdivision ordinances, and they also do the code enforcement and development. They oversee the development and implementation of a lot of our plans. We have a comprehensive plan. As a matter of fact, we met with a citizen this morning to explain to them what our comprehensive plan is, what it means, where growth is designated, and things like that. And it was a very, very good meeting, very positive meeting. And I think they left here feeling much more informed on our county and where it's going. And we also carry out a lot of the demographic analysis, as you see there, from regional planning, regional transportation planning, and rural planning. As mentioned, with public hearings and things like that, rezoning, CUP, subdivisions, all that comes through this department, and they don't just oversee the public hearing aspect in the community meetings and the staff reports. They actually review some of the plans that come in as well, some of the plan of developments, building and sign permits. As far as the budget line items go, personnel, $32,000 increase you see on the far right side there. That was mainly due to restructuring that we did. Actually, Miss Debbie Bird is here. She actually announced her retirement, and we managed somehow to talk her into staying until September of this year. We're very happy that she decided to stay. But with that, she was actually the Assistant Director of Community Development. So she is now the Environmental Manager, which left the Assistant Director of Community Development position open, which we filled with Miss Jamie Sherry, who's also with us today. So that's where you're seeing some of that. They're going to see a decrease on the environmental budget side because of that shift, and the increase on the planning side because of that shift. And the operating costs, minor increase from computer equipment and some professional services. Just to talk about the staffing section real quick. I think this goes with probably any department, but we really, when we're talking about staffing, and you'll see at the very bottom, we're requested a position, and it's not proposed in the FY21 budget. We're always looking forward to the future workloads that we have, the current workloads that we have, and we want to make sure that when we request a position that's fully sustained. So we work very diligently with Mr. Badesky and Barbara on the finance side of things to see how all that works out. We fully recognize that when we ask for positions, that this board can't support every single position that's asked. We fully recognize that. But just to give you a little insight as to what that position actually is, it's a transportation planner is what we're looking for. As you know, we have just an increase in transportation planning and projects and the Fairground Road roundabout behind us and the extension for that. There's just a lot of transportation items. So when we talk to Mr. Badesky and Barbara about it, we don't just talk about what the position is and what the needs are there. We also talk about if that position isn't funded, how do we handle that? With this particular one, Tom Coleman and myself have actually been handling all things, tag teaming all things transportation for a few years now, and I feel very comfortable that we can still sustain that for the next year. Also, if we ever get just some random VDOT project coming in that may overwhelm us and we can't get to, we also have on-call engineers that can help supplement and augment our staff if we absolutely need somebody on the transportation side to help us. So that's how we would handle that situation.
That's good.
The first bullet point is only one bullet point, but it's a loaded bullet point. There was a lot of work that went into the rezoning, the zoning ordinance rewrite. Ms. Hunter and her staff put in a lot of work. We're talking a few years of the project, and I know she's very relieved, as we all are, that that's been adopted, and we have a much better document moving forward. We do have a zoning map project that should be done sometimes this summer, and as it nears completion, we'll definitely be informing this board either in 2x2 meetings or just shoot you an email to let you know about that. Approval of the first mixed plan use development project, Mannequin Town, was just earlier this month, and we also deal with every rezoning conditional use permit that comes through. The next few slides, I'm going to go through a little quick because they're basically rehashes of last year's transportation-related items. Fairground Road Extension, I've already mentioned with the intersection improvement. That's still on track for February 2022 advertisement. VDOT views them as two separate projects because they're two separate funding sources, but we're doing our best to work them seamlessly together. And at the moment, I'm proud and happy to say that we are on track to seamlessly move them together. We are planning on making the same 4 smart scale applications for VDOT that we made in August of 2018. It'd be the 3 Chopped Underpass project, the I-64 Ashland Road Interchange project, and I'm going fast with these, but if you have any questions, by all means, please interrupt me. The Oilville Interchange and the Route 288 STAR study. Route 288 is probably arguably our biggest road issue in the county. It's just basically a parking lot in the AM and PM hours, depending on which way you're going. This application from us is just from Tuckahoe Creek Parkway to Broad Street. From Tuckahoe Creek Parkway south to Huguenot Trail and Powhatan, that's going to be a TPO application. That's a Transportation Planning Organization. So that basically completes that whole section, even though obviously 288 is much longer than that. That's really what that focus was on. And we're only allowed to have 4 applications because of our size. East End Trail project, you've been hearing about this for several years. We actually are happy to say that the wetland delineation near completion survey is happening as we speak, and we are way ahead of the VDOT schedule. VDOT says we didn't even have to start engineering, I think, until later this year. I think it was even December of this year. And we also this past year developed a road service district policy. I moved this. Debbie Bird actually headed this up. It's more of on the planning side of the house, but Debbie did a great job in creating a policy and moving that forward. So outlooks and challenges, subdivision rewrite, next big thing on the list, increase in development activity as we're seeing just across the board, all the transportation projects I've mentioned, and there's several more, digitization of the zoning maps, that was another project, hopefully this summer complete, and our new permitting software. Moving to the environmental and land development. Basically, all things stormwater related go through this department. That's from reviewing not just plan of developments like some of the other departments do as well. There's also land disturbance permits, stormwater permits, coordination with FEMA, coordination with DEQ, coordination with VDH. That's really where a lot of those duties and disciplines reside, and that's in Ms. Bird's house. They also oversee, after the plans are reviewed, They want to make sure that it's actually constructed correctly. You've heard from some citizens at citizen comment period that there have been some stormwater concerns. Her department's the one that actually goes out there and makes sure that if silt fence is on a plan, silt fence is installed. If a sediment trap is designed, that the sediment trap is installed and things like that. So that they really oversee all of that. Her department was also overlooking the, at Hidden Rock, there's the county landfill that was there. If you recall, this was 6, maybe 9 months ago now. We got word from DEQ that we could close and stop monitoring the groundwater maintenance of that. And maybe a little known fact is Ms. Bird is also the liaison for Monacan Soil and Water Conservation District. They do several other things in our county. Oh, I see a fist bump over here to my right. She does a great job with that, and actually I do have a few slides, so I'm just going to skip past that little section because we do have some slides on them. I mentioned earlier Debbie's role shifting, so you see a little decrease on the personnel side, and the operational decrease of, well, $29,270 is $30,000. That was due to the, we don't have to monitor the groundwater at the landfill anymore, so that was that decrease. As mentioned with the planning and the transportation planner, we did request a position in environmental. This would just be another environmental inspector because we're seeing an uptick in construction. H.H. Hunt is already well underway with their project. Reader's Branch has been out there rocking and rolling for probably about a year now. We also feel that we can handle a lot of this workload in-house, and if there's anything we need to do to use one of our on-call engineers, that's what they're here for. If there's some subdivision that we can't get to and we need somebody to go out there and inspect the silt fence and inspect all the stormwater projects, that's even plan review if we absolutely need to. If we get an extra plan in that we just can't get to in the 30-day window we want to review all these plans in, then we can actually give that to one of our on-call engineers. And we've actually done that on the public utility side of the house. Mentioned the closure of the landfill, and the environmental department was the department that secured the Department of Forestry grant to put about 60 trees along Broad Street in the Centerville Village. This is more of a transportation-related item, but it's the Bridgewater subdivision and their roads, bringing their subdivision roads into the state system. I left this in the environmental department because Debbie's actually really been the face of this project for several years now. And she's been the face of it. She's done a lot of work in it. So we left that here as opposed to moving it to transportation, but we hope to have some resolution on that soon. So future outlook and challenges. Big one ever since I was just an engineer sitting behind a desk is trying to track all of the stormwater related changes that seem to come out on a yearly basis. Yeah. That's from the TMDLs, the total maximum daily loads, keeping track of all the law changes with BMPs, best management practices. Sometimes we feel like we're pulling our hair out trying to track all these things, and they're constantly changing, but the environmental department does a good job of tracking those law changes, making sure that all of these things are implemented correctly. I mentioned FEMA earlier. They're updating all their floodplain maps. We've had several meetings with them. This is ongoing. We hope to have, and maybe Debbie can clarify a little bit, I think we should have some resolution on that very soon, but it will impact some of the development in the county because it's our understanding that some of the floodplains that they originally designed are a little bit wider in some areas than we originally thought. But as that information comes forward, we're happy to share it. Monacan Soil and Water, again, we have interaction with them. Debbie's our liaison. She actually goes to all their meetings and participates with them. And for our 2 new board members, you may not know this, but we actually do have an agreement with them, and a portion of the environmental budget is designated for Monacan Soil and Water. And so as a result of that, in their agreement, they do have specific deliverables they have to provide to us. These are measurable deliverables, and Debbie tracks them on a quarterly basis, and they submit to her on a quarterly basis. But they do so many things for this county. I don't even know where to begin. I mean, Mr. Lyle can probably come up here and talk to you for a while about it. But they do so many things from educational aspects to general. Is he shaking his head? Let's start that. Start the timer. School groups, local farmers markets, things like that. They do so much for our county, and we're happy to have that partnership. They, not to us, but they are requesting internally a minor increase in their staffing support. That doesn't change our dollar value on our side. And this is because they have somebody who has worked for them for 30 plus years and they're retiring. So we wish her all the best, but they do want to replace her with a full-time position and adding another position to increase efficiency. So, with that, they're going to be doing a little restructuring, which is that last bullet point. as with the environmental department, which is why this is under their slideshow, is trying to keep up with all the different changes from the Chesapeake Bay rules, the TMDLs, the Phase 3 watershed implementation plan. Debbie and her team, as well as Monica, have been tracking that and making sure and keeping us informed, actually, of all the changes there. And just like we did in economic development this past year and public utilities a few years before, is increasing our presence on the internet. Sounds like they're doing a lot more things and being much more purposeful in how they get the word out to what they do. Building inspections. They're out there every day making sure that what's built by our contractors, what's been approved by this Board of Supervisors for housing and commercial development and things like that, making sure all that stuff is built safely and securely so that residents can move into their houses and business owners can move into their businesses. And as far as their budget goes, there's a few changes. I'm actually going to touch on the personnel line item and the staffing line item on the next slide because there's actually a few intricate items with that, but I'll touch on it on the next slide. But the operating costs, you see a $25,000 decrease. That was only because there was a vehicle that was requested that was moved to the general services side of the house, so that was a reduction there. But to the personnel and staffing, this past year we had 2 staff members retire. Mr. Lewis Beck, we actually had a resolution for him a few months ago. We miss him dearly. He had a wealth of knowledge. And just recently, Mr. Kirk Caucus retired. The 2 of them together were fantastic guys. They really knew their stuff. They had several decades of experience. But with their retirement, what that afforded us to do is the opportunity to do a little restructuring, kind of like we did in community development a few years ago. The building inspections department was one of the few departments that didn't have a true deputy, so to speak, a true assistant under Mr. Fisher, who's our building official. When he's sick or on vacation or something like that, we need somebody in-house, somebody that's here that can help make decisions in his absence. So we were able to rework some of the positions due to the retirements and have a few promotions and a few new hires to be able to accommodate. And we feel that we're in good shape now. So going back to the staffing slide, that 10 is back down to 9 because we feel that we're good at the 9 for the time being. So that's why that required a little more explanation. And at the bottom, we completed the departmental policy manual. I don't know if you recall last year I had a big fat 3-ring binder with all kinds of information in it. And I said, this is underway and we hope to complete it soon. We did complete it. It's extremely important because I'm huge on cross-training. I want everyone to be cross-trained on as many things as they possibly can, specifically in our customer service center. If somebody's out sick, we need to know how to take in a permit. How do I know how to take in a permit? Well, I can open this manual now, and it's really just a step-by-step. Step 1, do this. Step 2, click here, things like that. So we're happy to have that in-house now. I was talking to Mr. Fisher about the second bullet point, inspector skills. It's just sort of an in-house training program. This really touches on what I just said about cross-training and in-house knowledge. While building inspections they're not always knowledgeable in everything that's building inspection. We have people that are very focused specifically on the commercial aspect of things, which is certifications. Then you have residential side, which is different. There's different rules, and we want to make sure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing, and we want to do some sort of cross-training project there. And so Mr. Fisher approached me about an in-house training program, and I think that's actually a great idea, and that'll help increase our cross-training. And as always, we have lots of certifications and training that are external to us. As with public utilities and with planning, there's so many things out there. We want to make sure that everyone is up to par with those items. And I'm happy to report that they are. Economic development. We just presented just a few weeks ago on everything, on almost everything economic development related. But just to refresh your memory and any citizens who may be here, anyone listening at home that may not have seen that presentation, the Economic Development Department focuses on numerous things, specifically new businesses, our BRE program, which is business retention and expansion, tourism, workforce development, and managing our recently approved strategic plan. For the budget, there's just a minor decrease on the personnel side, and the operational side, we do have an increase there, and that was because this is the first year we've actually been fully staffed in the environmental department or economic development department since the previous director left us a few years ago. And what I challenged our team, and that's Sarah Worley and Casey Verberg, I challenged them with going out and seeing what conferences should we be going to that we're not going to? How do we increase Goochland's expanse, not just in the Commonwealth, but nationally? What seminars are we going to or not going to? And I really challenge them with figuring out where do we fit best? What do we think fits best for Goochland County? And they've actually done a great job this past year of trying to find out certain things. So you do see an increase in the operational because they do have an increase in training and education. And there's also a few extra websites. So aside from the seminars and things, there's other things that we have at our fingertips that we can utilize to get Goochland County out there. If you recall, a few weeks ago, I mentioned some computer programs. VScan is one that we increased our presence from, I think it was 40 sites to over 106 sites, something like that. That's one thing we're looking for. And they actually approached me and said there's a few computer software programs that they think would help us as well. So that's what you're seeing in that budget. And there is no request for staffing. For major developments, of course, we had the adoption of the strategic plan. Many of a few weeks ago, I mentioned a lot of those objectives are complete. And when I say complete, yes, we met the objective, but a lot of those items are just maintenance items. Even though it's complete, we now have to maintain those things moving forward. We have to maintain the list of businesses, and we have to maintain all the different trackers and data points that we've been looking at. We have conducted 25 business visits and over $50 million of new capital investment. So for the future, I'm about to wrap up here. Identify target markets, that's already underway. We've already had some meetings internally on that. We always want to continue our existing business visits. As a matter of fact, that's one of those bullet points you're just going to see in perpetuity because that's something we're always going to do. Host business roundtables, conduct business walks. We had one a few months ago. We want to do a few more. We found it very successful and informative for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership. Develop incentive program and policies, evaluate a regional partnership opportunities, and the last one is very important, which is sustain everything we've done just in this past year. So with that, I will do my best to take any questions and answer them if you have them. If not, we have a great staff behind me that can maybe chime in if there's something I can't answer.
All right, so thank you, Mr. Kilduff. Questions? Mr. Lumpkins?
Thank you,
You get
Mr.
two
Kilduff.
questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Kilduff. Just only one on transportation. You
Okay.
covered a lot. Thank you. In your community development part of the budget document, page 182, page 183, you don't need to look at it. I'm just telling you.
Okay.
It's a future outlook section in the
Okay.
community development. And you've already touched on transportation staffing needs, or that you and Mr. Coleman are gonna make it work, I guess, for this year.
Yep.
You say transportation initiatives will also require significant staff time. We've touched on that. And there's a lot of good stuff in this future outlook section, but I want to read another sentence in it. To be competitive in the future, the county will need to direct resources to conduct transportation studies well in advance of application deadlines to collect relevant data for data-intensive applications. My question is, does this budget reflect that we're doing that? Now, I can flip through the transportation CIP starting at page 336.
Yeah.
And,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, well, go ahead if you have some.
Oh, I was just going to say that was more specific to when an applicant, let's say the Mannequin Town case as an example, they had a TIA they submitted to us. Sometimes we can review those in-house, but if there's not enough, they take a lot of time, especially if they're a big project. So if we need to subcontract that out or use an on-call engineer, we can do that. That's sort of what that was referencing. Correct me if I'm
But is the need for, and when I read this, I thought we were talking more for when we're applying for VDOT funding, that we would need to show studies to get our applications more competitive. I thought that's what that was referring to.
It can. With the Three Chopped Underpass project, we actually did have to allocate some funds for that. However, our partners at VDOT, or at the TPO, whenever we make a smart scale application, they always have a pre-application process, and we run that through them and ultimately with VDOT as well. So there is a sort of a help, so to speak, a help that they provide to us to make sure that all of our applications have all the checks in the check boxes. And I'm sorry if that didn't answer your question.
No, I think you're getting there, but what
Okay.
I'm asking, and what I understand from the transportation piece, the way the state is going is, and for us to be competitive, we're going to have to show more detail, at least for some of the programs. And I thought that's where this was going. In the sentence, it says, to be competitive in the future, the county will need to direct resources to conduct studies.
Maybe to stay competitive. instead
Right,
of,
right. Well in advance of application deadlines to collect relevant data. So that's why, when I read that, I don't think that's applying to us reviewing developers' TIAs. Am I right about that?
I think it's all of it. I mean, it is the consultant services for reviewing TIAs. It's for anything else that pops up. The three-chopped underpass wasn't something we had prepared for in the budget. That popped up throughout the when we were discussing smart scale, and this was probably 2 years ago. I think it was sort of mid-year is about when we started talking about that, and we allocated some funds to that.
Well, let me just try to tell you the way my mind is working on this. We talked about utilities earlier, and we talked about building funds for R&R. We had the money last year. We did another $500,000. We know transportation is a significant challenge. You all acknowledge it. We all know it. Is there money, do we have the money in the budget to meet, does this budget reflect what you say we need in your budget document? To be competitive, we need to direct resources to conduct transportation studies. Does your budget request reflect the funds to meet that need to do more studies?
Short answer is yes. Yeah, we're good. Yeah, Tom and I, we meet, and I probably should have mentioned this. Mr. Coleman and I, we meet every other week on everything transportation. It takes up the better part of an hour and a half. And we talk about what's coming down the pipe, it's not the easiest thing to plan for transportation, but I think we do a pretty good job of tracking VDOT, even though VDOT's kind of hard to track sometimes. But we do sit down because we know that some of these applications are every 2 years. Some of them are off on the 2 years, like the TA, transportation alternative projects, are the opposite year of smart scale projects. So trying to track all that, and we're always doing that look ahead to make sure we're still competitive. Given that we had the same 4 smart scale applications, we felt very comfortable. We'll see how that shakes out in August, and maybe there is a different type of recommendation if we don't get those fundings or if we do get funding. So, but for the next year, I think that's your question. I feel like we're in good shape.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay,
It's something we keep our thumb on that pulse a lot.
okay. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Spoonhour.
Just a comment, Mr. Koloff. I joked with you in the break that I expected that I was going to have a lot of questions when I saw how many positions you requested versus what you proposed. I just want to say that from a new board member's perspective, I think you answered all of my questions in your presentation. So I think this could be a case study in how you present, hey, we're not getting it, but here's how we're going to address it, which is what my concerns centered around. So to be able to say, here's what we're leaving on the table, but here's how we're going to address it, I think that was a great presentation, and I thank you for it.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, no other questions? All right. Mr.
Thank you very
Burruff,
much. Thank you.
Staff, thank you very much. Mr. Podesky, do you want to kind of pull this all together for us today?
Sure, I will do my best. Ms. Lashlet, this is the second of our budget meetings. At the end of each session, as I shared last time, we will pause. Not only did we have the introduction, we had the sheriff and Fire and Rescue Chief, Animal Protection join. We did talk about it a little bit further in 2x2s. Staff is continuing to track an outstanding item list that we will go back to and confirm any of those outstanding concerns and make sure they were addressed. As we go throughout the budget process, I open that opportunity here again today that if there is anything additional that may have arisen today or in the board's research requests, conversations, if there's anything we need to be following up, we want to make sure we get that down. And obviously, this isn't the last opportunity for that, but want to make sure we're consistent with tracking that so we have the time between sessions. As you know, we have another session next Wednesday, not Tuesday, so staff is going to enjoy the extra data prep that we didn't have this week, but we're always glad. I just received some constituent questions today on the budget that we'll be following up with and sharing those with you as well. But if anything else the board has, this is our opportunity to track those and do our best to either answer them here today or bring you back some additional responses after today.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Podesky. Okay, so we are.
Are there any?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman. Are there any that we need to track that may have arisen that we didn't address earlier that have come up since we let all the staff go back to work earlier? anything, and certainly, sorry, Madam Chairman.
That's okay, no
If there is
problem.
anything, we're glad to take it. If not, we'll keep following up with you at each session.
Trust me, we know how to find you.
No doubt, no doubt.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're at the adjournment period of our meeting. However, it's not common to have a public comment period in these type of meetings, but if there is anyone who'd like to make a comment, happy to give you 3 minutes. 1, 2, 3. Okay? We'll close. I just thought we gave you a chance. Okay. So our next meeting will be in a different day and a different time. It'll be Wednesday, March 4th at 2 p.m. And then also the regular meeting, the evening meeting, the public hearings at 6 p.m., March 4th. On Tuesday, March 10th, we have a 2 p.m. Budget meeting for the budget and CIP work session. Tuesday, November 7th is our regular 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. meeting. And then Tuesday, the 21st at 2 p.m., adoption of the county schools budget, capital improvement plan, utility taxes, rates and taxes. All these meetings are open to the public. So being no other business, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.